Okay, so I wanted to walk you guys through my research process when I'm looking stuff up for Pluto. Today, I'm going to look up stuff regarding that you might have seen on the news about grain-free foods causing some heart problems in dogs. And I noticed I've been feeding him Taste of the Wild since 2011, and I noticed that now Taste of the Wild has come out with some ancient grain formulas for their dogs. Uh, by that I mean grains that are thousands and thousands of years old. So I'm kind of skeptical about that. What is it about an older grain that's better for dogs? You know, I always thought grains are just fillers for dogs unless they're providing some kind of essential nutrients. So if you're kind of skeptical about that like me and you want to do a little bit more digging, uh, you can just watch me and see how I do it. Maybe see if it's you learn anything new, or even if you have any suggestions. But this is a typical research, and it only takes maybe 30 minutes tops. So it's not gonna you can still love your dog, but you don't have to spend hours and hours researching, right? 30 minutes and you already got plenty of information. So here we go. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, we're going to just type in the problem. Just pull up basically a news article or something. So we're going to type in, instead of dog, we're going to type in canine. Instead of heart, we type in cardio. And we're going to type in grain-free food. So, and we use these kind of fancy words, canine and cardiac, because we want results. We don't want a bunch of blog posts. We want to use the language that these experts use. So here's one from the FDA, one link. Here's one from the AKC. Here's a study, which is nice, but it is an article. It's not an actual study. It's an article that's reporting on a study. So here's the first one. So we already have right there, bingo. We have our keyword to search, canine dilated cardiomyopathy, or DCM, dilated cardiomyopathy. So that's going to help us a lot here in a second. We're just going to go ahead and copy that search term. Okay, let's see what's in this one. This is from the AKC, American Kennel Club. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these articles. I'll show you why in a second. Okay, should you be concerned? Here is, hold on. Here's actually our food, 53 reports. This is sorted by the amount of reports. So that is kind of worrying. The food I've been giving Pluto, obviously I give him all kinds of food every now and then. He has kind of a varied diet, a diverse kind of diet, but this is the main thing I give him. So that is concerning. It's up there. It's in the top 3 right there of reports, and this is from 2019. Okay, let's look at this one. Today's veterinarypractice.com. Okay. I don't think we're going to get a lot of information. See, what they'll have, these articles, they'll have these little quotes here and there from the actual study, but they don't actually dig into the studies that they're citing. Let's see if they even have a link to the study. Was recently here. They have a link, PLOS 1. Oh, there we go. Let me go ahead and show you the next thing I was going to do. Okay, so we're going to go to something that's available to everybody. It's called Google Scholar, right? This will help you weed out a lot of those kind of blog posts and articles and try to give you as kind of a professional source as possible. So in Google Scholar, we're going to type in, remember our keyword, dilated cardiomyopathy. We can also type in diet, right? If we type in treatment, That's actually going to be for acute treatment, like when a dog is in a clinical setting, like he's at the vet, actually undergoing an operation or something, or a treatment. So we're not going to type in treatment. We're going to just type in diet. And again, we type in canine. We don't type in dog. So here are a bunch of studies. I'm just going to spend probably I'm going to pause the video and spend maybe 10-15 minutes looking over them. Just pull up the best one. Here on the left, you can set a date range, which is also nice. So I'm just going to pause the video here. Okay, so here is one study we found. This is actually probably the best one. I'm going to link it in the description. The link is via academic.oup.com. This is, if you could just read one of these studies, I would say spend about 20 minutes and read this whole thing. It contains a lot of good information. They talk about, so there is a rush to blame like peas, lentils, what they call pulse ingredients, chickpeas, things like that. But these authors here are reviewing a lot of the different literature, and they're trying to show that there's a lot more going on here to the story. So specifically, it could be that, for example, dogs are being given more fiber in their diet. That fiber, although it's a good thing, it also will require higher amounts of, say, taurine and taurine's precursors, which are in canines, that would be methionine and cysteine, and then also carnitine, which is only available via meat sources. Those might also be getting reduced if you're including more grains in a dog's diet, or even if you're omitting grains and just putting in a bunch of peas and rice. So they just point out that it's a variety of factors. It's not necessarily the lack of grains or the increase in peas and lentils that are causing it, but it's the way that these new diets are interacting with, for example, methionine or cysteine in the production of taurine, which a dog can synthesize taurine on his own, but he needs those precursors. And also the precursors for carnitine, which would be lysine and I believe also methionine. You also need those, and all these sources, because of these special formulations, may actually not. Nothing is definitive. These authors are not saying anything is for sure, but it could be that these new diets are decreasing those. And here we're going to see in other studies here that it is true actually that these dogs that are fed these kind of grain-free diets do indeed have lower levels of taurine and carnitine in the blood. We'll pull those up right now. Okay, so here is one. This is from 2019. Echocardiographic phenotype of canine dilated cardiomyopathy differs based on diet type. That's a fancy way of saying the heart looks different based on what you feed the dog, right? And we're going to go, so basically, so GF1 here, that means grain-free 1, GFO, grain-free other. Unfortunately, they don't get into details here. I'm not sure where the full text is, but for our purposes, this is enough here. So here it says left ventricular size and diastole and systole were greater, and sphericity index was less for grain-free 1 compared with grain-based dogs. And, again, these are just fancy ways of saying there's differences in the hearts. Specifically, the heart seems bigger, right? At least the ventricular size. So now here, this may seem a little confusing here. Taurine deficiency was not identified in grain-free dogs, but they still treated some dogs with taurine supplementation, and they all showed improvement, right? So of the dogs they treated, they still showed improvement. But then, why again? Why are you treating them if there was no taurine deficiency? But anyways, let's move on to the next one. Before we move on, actually, something to note about this study. They tested 48 dogs. They studied 48 dogs, which is good, right? Some of these studies are on just like 10 dogs, 15 dogs. But it's they say it's a retrospective study, which basically means they're looking back on data that already existed. And not only that, but all these dogs, they're with their owners. So all the information they get regarding what the owners fed the dogs, that's all self-reported information. It's not like these dogs are in a controlled laboratory. So you can take this right here with a grain of salt, but we'll keep looking, see what we can find. So this right here is actually from 2003. This is one of the papers that was cited here, or at least the results were mentioned in this 2019 article. All this study is saying, this is just a summary that we're looking at. It's saying basically dogs fed a lamb meal-based diet were shown to have lower levels of taurine in the blood. They abbreviate it TAU. But like the other study mentioned, it has lower bioavailability, and also it's lost through excretion, obviously. So now this lamb meal diet, I bet if we dug into this study, I bet that's lamb and rice diet, right? And that's what these authors say. They actually say rice bran is interfering with the digestibility of some of these important ingredients, specifically taurine. I don't know if they said if rice bran affects carnitine, but so that's one study. It doesn't tell us a whole lot from this summary, but it helps. Okay, I came across this. It's kind of a review by one Anton C. Bainen, condensed version of an article in Dutch. It's called Canine Cardiac Diets, Efficacy Unproven. So he's basically saying, about salt restriction, he's saying those diets don't really do enough here. And he's saying at least one study's results is impossible on sodium restriction for a cardiac diet. And he also talks about here omega-3 fatty acids. So he says, compared with other oils, fish oil supplementation, here's the dosage, for 6 weeks, diminished arrhythmia. Okay, now here's what we're looking for, l-carnitine and taurine. And about those, he says, he's citing a study here that actually found. So these dogs were basically diagnosed with DCM, dilated cardiomyopathy, and they had a taurine deficiency as well. So they gave them, those dogs, in a double-blinded, placebo-controlled trial, which is good, but the sample size is low here. It is 14, which is pretty low. Anyways, here's the dosage. They gave him, now pay attention to this, because we're going to look up supplements here in a minute, and you'll see why. So they said, yeah, the dogs improved just fine with 500 milligrams of taurine and 1,000 milligrams of carnitine given twice a day. So in one day, 1,000 milligrams of taurine and 2,000 milligrams of carnitine. That is a humongous dose, and I guarantee you when we look at supplements here in a minute, we're not going to find a single supplement with near that much. But at least this study found dogs are responsive. If you flood them with these supplements, they do respond. So it's good in that regard. But yeah, these dogs didn't end up getting better. These dogs diagnosed with DCM. I'll link this article here. It's on Cocker Spaniels, and they gave them such a huge dose. But anyways, I'll link that here. So just to recap, really everything I needed to know. That's why I love using Google Scholar, because when I just did a normal Google search, I did not find this link. But when I search via Google Scholar, use kind of those specific keywords. Once we knew what the keywords were, I found this. It's pretty long, but if you read the whole thing, it actually contains a lot of good information. And by the time I was done reading this, I already knew everything that all these other studies mentioned, right? This basically reviews, and they cite their sources here at the bottom. So if you want to dig in deeper, you can dig into each of those sources and judge for yourself, right? But that's beyond the purposes of what I'm going to do, especially for this video. So what we know basically is a few things. First, there is something going on with these new diets that is possibly restricting the absorption of these. Again, I'm not a doctor, right? This is just what these authors are saying. Something's going on that is restricting the absorption and also increasing the excretion of some of these essential compounds which would normally prevent these diseases. Now, here is my total layman's interpretation of all these, what I just read. One, none of these studies mentioned it, but I'm going to resume our 2 or 3 times a week runs, right? I used to run a lot with Pluto almost every other day. We ran about 1.5 miles. I stopped doing that. I'm going to resume doing that because one thing that all these people are overlooking is these diets have gotten really rich in the past, especially the past decade, right? These are not dollar store foods anymore that have mostly corn in them. They're getting really rich, a lot of, very nutritious, but it might be, in my opinion, almost, if you have a dog, most people don't even take their dogs on walks. So if you give that dog some of these grain-free diets with like 32% protein in them, I mean, to me, that's also a recipe for a disaster. No one mentioned that, right? None of these people are mentioning that, but just, that might be bro science, common sense, but I'm going to give my dog more exercise since I'm giving him this really high quality, really nutrient dense food. Another thing, I'm not going to be scared of all of peas and legumes, although I am going to avoid rice bran. If you have like a lamb meal and rice, I'd avoid anything with rice because they actually did report rice bran is affecting the absorption. Peas and lentils are okay if you also have a higher amount of taurine and cysteine. One thing that these authors say is there's something called, I think it's the AAFCO. I'll try to find it. The American Association, here we go. Association of American Feed Control Officials. So they have these minimum guidelines for these essential nutrients: methionine, lysine. I didn't see, there it is, cysteine, and taurine is here somewhere. But these authors are saying that these are not enough because they're not taking into account the bioavailability, and neither are they taking into account the bioavailability based on the, say, for example, increases in fiber or increases in, like, say you eat, the dog eats a lot of rice bran, different kinds of legumes, lentils that might interact with all that. So the last thing I'm going to do, I'm not going to buy into the new Taste of the Wild ancient grain formula, right? Even if it has the same amount of all the nutrients, proteins, and all that, unless they are increasing their taurine, methionine, cysteine. If they're increasing those amounts in the food, then I'll buy the ancient grain formula. But what I can do for now is just, out of curiosity, look into, is there any supplements that offer carnitine and taurine, since dogs are not getting enough in these new diets. So we're just going to search, again, we search canine, not dog. taurine, carnitine. We leave out the L. It should be l-carnitine. 5 Things You Need to Know by Herb Smith Inc. We're going to skip that. Here's some stuff. Here's one link from Amazon. We're looking at products now. Okay, let me pause it, and when I have a few pulled up, I'll walk you through it. So anytime you have these top 5, top 10, top 7 lists, you need to treat those very cautiously, right? The skeptic in me looks at these websites and says, well, this is just going to be in order of who's giving you the biggest commission, right? So the only reason I would click on something like this is to see, just to get an idea of like 7 different foods that do contain that. I'm definitely not going to have this website, no disrespect to Breedsy.com, I'm not going to have this website influence me beyond that. And interestingly, you see here, look at their number 2, right? That's actually, if you remember, I believe the 3rd highest reported food that's in dogs with this condition. So it's funny that they just seem to be ignoring and just putting in foods that have those ingredients, just ignoring everything else. So we're going to close that. Here's something on Amazon, and I looked all over and I did not find, this is so bizarre, I did not find any information about what's actually in here, right? It says it's a taurine boost. I don't know what's in here. There's no ingredients label, right? 75 grams of what? 150 grams of what? This is crazy, right? Why? I can't believe anyone would buy this. There's no label that I've seen, and they don't say here to help, right? This is what they say that's in it: taurine, carnitine, coenzyme Q10, and omega-3s. But how much? You know, it's crazy. They don't say, at least not that I see. They just say that it's in there. I can't believe anyone would buy this, at least from Amazon. Now, maybe if I went to their website, maybe they'll say, who knows, but for now, I'm going to skip that. Now, here's what I found. This is from Veterinary Science. This has L-carnitine 250 milligrams, L-taurine 250 milligrams. So if you remember that study on Cocker Spaniels, well, real quick here, this says per 30 pounds of body weight. So for Pluto, I'd give 2. Technically, it should be 2.5, but I'd just give 2. So you could say that's, for my dog, 500 milligrams of taurine and 500 milligrams of carnitine. If you remember that study of Cocker Spaniels, they're giving dogs upwards of, well, exactly 2,000 milligrams of carnitine in a day and 1,000 milligrams of taurine in a day, right? And they did show improvement, even after being weaned off the actual heart medication. So that's a very high dose, and I just wonder, I'll see if I can find, on my own, I'll see if I can find any higher concentration of these two, but, you know, that's still much lower than that study was on Cocker Spaniels. Maybe this is a good preventative dose, I don't know. I couldn't find a study on guidelines for supplementation with these two, carnitine and taurine, okay? So that's basically it. This video will be, I think, just over 25 minutes. On my own here, I spent probably 40 minutes, 45 minutes. It didn't take that long to learn quite a bit. And we avoided all kinds of nonsense sources, like, you know, holistic herbal websites and blog posts. We just kind of got right to the chase. Here's basically the key points that I took away from what I researched. First, this is my own theory. I'm going to just give him more exercise, right? Starting from the basics. It's something that all these researchers and, you know, everyone else, they seem to be just overlooking that. What happens to the heart in response to more exercise? Now, and then the rest of these I take from those studies. I'm going to avoid too much fiber, right? Some fiber is good. Too much is probably bad. rice bran specifically is bad, and I need to do some further research and look up other ingredients that will affect taurine and carnitine levels in Pluto. And also, once this bag of food I have here runs out, I'm gonna look for foods that have these ingredients in them, but you want, according to those authors from that first study we went over, we want probably more than what the AAFCO recommends. And finally, you could even, he'll be 9 in late October. He'll be 9 years old. Maybe it's time to just go ahead and just start supplementing him with taurine and carnitine in obviously a lower dose than what those Cocker Spaniels were given. I'm not going to give him 1,000 milligrams, but maybe we'll give him a low dose. We need to actually do more research and see if there's an agreed upon dose for supplementation versus actual treatment of a dog. Again, he doesn't have dilated cardiomyopathy, right? As far as I know, he's a healthy dog, but I just don't want him to have any problems in the future. All right, well, that's basically it. One last thing, guys, and I promise this is all. Just be very careful of anybody, including myself, in this video you just watched. Just be careful of anyone on YouTube claiming to be some kind of expert, authority, or they claim to have this and that credentials. They claim to be a guest speaker at all these conferences and whatnot. I'm just a regular person that likes my dog, but I've spoken to on YouTube many people who claim to be this and that, and if you just keep asking them the right questions, eventually they will expose themselves. Most of these people I've talked to on YouTube are just phonies, man. On YouTube, you can be anything you want. You can be a vet, you can be a doctor, you can be a behaviorist. I talked to someone who said he's a some kind of dog psychologist working at a shelter, and I said, "Great. Where's your credentials? Where's your publications? Right? Where shelter do you work at?" And immediately they got defensive. Right? Ask these people for proof. If they claim any kind of authority, ask them for proof. Ask to see their work. But realize that most of these people on YouTube are just regular people, just like you and me. So take what they say with a grain of salt. And that is all. You can watch this clip of Pluto.
Pluto.